In this video, I'm going to take this hand spun yarn I made in the last video and weave it in a woven wall hanging. So let's get started. We need to come up with a plan for how I'm going to use this yarn. Now, my full intention with this one, after the whole garden thing didn't really pan out because I added too much white. You can see all the details in that video. I'll leave a link right here for that. But I thought this yarn would make a really pretty sky, and I love a good abstract landscape painting. So I think that's what we're gonna do with it. So here's what it looks like now that it's in a cake. So I just balled it up, caked it up, I don't know. But this is what a yarn cake looks like. And I'm very, very excited to weave this in. So we need to make some decisions in terms of what is this going to look like? What is it gonna be? I did a little bit of thinking beforehand. I found this really perfect size piece of driftwood. I think my parents found this for me somewhere on their travels at some point. This is like the perfect size for this size of loom. So I am thinking that my warp should be the full width of my loom, because then it'll cover the majority of this piece of driftwood. As for the warp string, I was thinking of using 4/8 cotton, but something I always have to think about when I'm using cotton, I'm gonna grab another weaving so I can kind of show you what I mean. Maybe I'll grab two. All right, I wanna show you a couple of examples so you can kind of see my thought process in action. So in this piece, I used a branch and I used linen warp string because I really like the way the linen warp string looks on the branch. You can see that those natural tones just really work well together. Then this one is very different. So this one I used a 8/8 cotton natural color, and I also stained this dowel, so it's very contrasted. So basically I have to decide what am I gonna like the look of better. Now, part of me thinks the linen warp string could look really good on this. However, I already have a natural color string within this yarn. So then I was thinking that actually the lighter color probably would look better in the long run, just because. So my initial instinct was to use the natural color but thinner warp string. This one is 4/8 cotton. But at the same time, because the lower part of this weaving is gonna have some more ground area, kind of like this one, I was wondering if maybe this would look better. And actually, when I lay this across here, it stands out less than the white. So let's move these aside so we can really just look at this one. When I lay the linen across the yarn, you can kind of see that it's disappearing a lot more than this natural color is. That one is standing out more. And the linen is almost the exact same color as this branch. So I think this is gonna be the better choice, simply for the fact that I don't want the warp string to become at all the focal point. I want the yarns to be the focal point, and I really like the idea that this warp string kind of disappears onto this branch a little better as well, versus when I do this, it stands out. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's just a personal preference, and I think that's what I would like to go with. All right, so I'm grabbing my regular sized flat pack frame loom for this. You can find these at spruceandlinen.com if you are interested. And I'm gonna start warping. So the first thing I'm gonna do is tie an overhand knot with a loop at the end, and then I'm just gonna start warping my loom. Now, since I'm doing a woven wall hanging with chunkier materials, I'm just gonna be doing a single warp, which just means I'm only putting one warp string between each of the notches. When I'm finished this weaving, I would like to hang it directly from the loops at the top. So there's a couple things I need to keep in mind for that. The first one is having the amount of loops at the top be divisible by at least 2 or 3. So let's just count these: 1, 2, 3, 17, 18. With 18, what's nice is I could either do groups of 2 or groups of 3. So that's kind of the perfect number. So I'm gonna end it here. So I didn't go quite all the way, but I also wanted to have an even amount of warp strings so that I have the full loops at the top. So now I'm just gonna cut off the excess, leave a tail, and tie this string at the bottom. I usually end up tying this in a triple knot because I'm paranoid. So I'm gonna cut off the excess here and here. Another thing I wanna keep in mind is how much length I need on the top to be able to tie this weaving from the loops onto the branch. Does that make sense? No. Another thing I wanna keep in mind is how much length at the top here I need to leave in order to use those loops to hang around this branch. And I do that with a, what is it called? A lark's head knot. So I'm just gonna create a faux lark's head knot in addition to getting my measuring tape of some sort. I don't know where my other measuring tape is, so I'm gonna use this like overkill one. So basically all I do is you just take a random amount, fold it over so you have a loop. Then you fold over that loop on itself like that, and then grab this. So now I'm gonna wrap this around here, and I wanna look at where the widest point of this branch is, and you can see that that's gonna be right here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that my loops, some of my loops will end up exactly here, but I wanna make sure I have enough space. And then I wanna have a little bit of room beyond that. So that's about an inch or so, maybe a little bit less. So now I'm gonna keep my left fingers on this, and I'm gonna undo that loop, and I'm just going to measure this. So that's 4 inches. So I know that my weaving has to end about 4 inches, maybe a hair less, just because these loops do go to here and then they're wrapped around the back of these notches. So I know that I need to leave about 3 3/4 from the top. So my weaving cannot be longer than that. So this is gonna be a pretty small woven wall hanging. And another thing you can do, if you kind of want to keep track of that line, you can take a scrap piece of yarn, and we can measure down, and I might just go on the edge, just so I have somewhat of a reference here. And let's go about there. And I can just kind of cut off the excess. And I can know that that's kind of where I'm aiming for, which will help me better visualize as I'm weaving where I need to stop. For these next few parts that I'm gonna do, I have a really great video for you called How I Start Every Weaving, and you can check that out right here. It just tells you exactly how I start basically every woven wall hanging that I make. I'm gonna weave this in just using simple plain weave or tabby, which is just going over one string, under one string, all the way across the loom. Now I'm gonna grab my favorite super bulky yarn, my favorite commercially made super bulky yarn, which is this Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick. I use it for the base work of my weavings all the time. I always have it on hand. It's just one of those ones that's really affordable, so I always keep it around. So I'm gonna grab about 4 widths of my loom and a little bit extra for this. Then I'm grabbing my tapestry needle. And actually, before I start weaving, I forgot a step. I forgot to tape down my loom. So now I'm just gonna stick this down to the table. And then next I'm going to do a row of twining followed by 2 rows of plain weave. And all that info is in that How I Start Every Weaving video. All right, I'm done all the base work for my weaving, so now I'm going to move on to figuring out the fringe. I would like to use one of my favorite combos for fringe, which is recycled cotton string, both just in a natural color. One is 5mm and one is 2mm, and then I combine those for each grouping of the fringe, and it just adds a little bit of extra texture to the fringe, which I really like. I only need 18 pieces of each, so probably what I'm gonna do is just cut them one by one in this scenario because it's not that much. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut 18 pieces of both the 5mm and the 2mm strings. All right, so now I have 18 of the 5mm and 18 of the 2mm, and all I'm gonna do is take one of each and tie Ryan knots around 2 strings at a time. All right, so I have all my fringe on, and so you can already see that it is not all the same length, which is, again, totally fine. I will fix that at the very end. Now we need to decide what we're weaving, where this is going. We know that this yarn is going to be the sky, and it's going to be what looks like beautiful hazy sky. Now, I do want to utilize as much of this yarn as I can. Obviously, there's no way I'm using all of this in this weaving. There's quite a bit here, but I'm just pulling some out so we can kind of visualize what that's going to look like. I would like to have some ground. Basically, we need to ground our sky. And I do have 2 colors of green that I actually used in this yarn as well. I thought those colors might make a really good hills or whatever we decide to do because it's actually utilized in the yarn as well. So I have this darker green and this lighter green. One of these browns could look really pretty, and I mean brown and blue, especially this kind of more muted, I feel like that looks really good together. And maybe we could stagger the colors so we have sort of a light, or sorry, a darker, a lighter, and then a dark again. I'm kind of feeling, to give it that more vintage abstract landscape, I think sticking with more muted colors makes sense. And these are all so pretty together. Let's grab a piece of this green. This one's not super, super long. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna split this in half. And this is something I do. So I just find a natural split point and then just very gently kind of let it fall apart. And the reason I do this is, one, the full thickness can sometimes be just really, really thick. And then it also helps your wool go a little bit further, because often we can sort of bulk up the look of the yarn, sorry, the bulk of the roving without having to actually use the full thickness of the roving. Let's just weave this over 2 under 2, just real quick. I'm gonna have to play around, so that probably is gonna mean I'm weaving and unweaving a little bit. So if you don't like that, you can skip ahead. But I love this one stitch. I call it the bubble stitch. And basically what you do is everywhere that the wool is going over top of the warp strings, you just sort of pull up a little bubble. I'm trying to decide if I like, do I like the look of that? Or is that already feeling really bulky, if that makes sense? What would happen if instead of doing 2 rows of that, what if I did 1 row? It's not really getting me the shape that I want though. I find weaving these types of weavings is a whole lot of like, what if I did this? And then I do something and I don't like it and I take it out. Let me try something else. I'm kind of liking that a bit more. So then I have this color and I'm gonna split this in half as well. Let's try to find a good spot to split it. I'm not that precise with it. And then maybe I'll go all the way across with this as well. So I just kind of left this hanging out here because I don't fully know if I'm going to be keeping all of this the way that it is currently. So for this one, I could do more of a sumac stitch just to switch it up a bit. So I guess right now my initial thoughts are just everything is feeling so chunky and I'm not sure if that's what I want it to look like. Now what might be kind of cool is to do the chunkiest section at the very bottom and then slowly get less chunky as I'm doing the rest, so it kind of feels like there's that depth there. So yeah, let's try splitting this again. Now with merino wool roving, you have to be careful not to weave it and unweave it too many times because it's gonna want to felt, and there's not really a whole lot of going back from that. All right, so I'm gonna try the same thing, this time using a half or a quarter thickness essentially. Now I'm wrapping my sumac around these sections where the previous row it was going under, so it's kind of filling in where you would otherwise see that warp string. So we've got a little bit of a start. So let's set our sky above this again. Another thing I was thinking I could try is after we have the sky, maybe we can try to add some sort of like abstract tree on top of all of this. And that might be really, really cool. So the one tricky part about weaving versus painting is it's not as easy to mix the colors. Like we can't blend the colors as much on the loom when we're talking about weaving with chunky materials like this. It's not as simple to just kind of you know, wet them and then they just blend together. I'm gonna split this again. So we're gonna work with a 1/4 thickness again. And I'm just gonna try something. So I'm gonna actually thread the roving into my tapestry needle. We're gonna just kind of start filling this in and seeing what happens. Let's go back this way. So I'm thinking about ending it here so that there's a bit of flow going on. Let's try that. So now the question is, before I start the sky, do I want to add any more? My thoughts are that I just don't know. And that's okay. I think I want to just leave this really simple like it is, and I want to start weaving in the sky. I'm gonna grab 3 nice long arm lengths of this, because the nice thing is, again, if I grab a nice long piece of this and I need to unweave it, I can 1000% use it for something else if I decide I hate it. Now, I think I want to use plain weave for this. There's already a lot of texture to the yarn, and plain weave is going to make this yarn go the furthest, meaning we don't need as much yardage to weave plain weave as we would if we were weaving sumac stitch or this bubble stitch and things like that. So, and I think it's like handspun feels a little bit more precious. Now, I don't want to just start weaving straight across. I want to fill in this lower part and then get wider as I go so that we keep these organic shapes. So I'm going to just start down here. And this yarn is definitely not a even thickness. So there's thicker parts, there's thinner parts. And I kind of really love that. And I'm weaving over 2 under 2 because I felt like over 1 under 1 might just be too much for a really chunky yarn. And again, I really want the yarn to shine through. And I kind of chose not to pay too close attention to the darker light sections. I just grabbed a piece right off the ball and I'm just going for it because I kind of want to see what this yarn will do in terms of variegation all on its own without me trying to like get certain sections in certain places. It's so interesting how it like is already again looking completely different now that I'm weaving it in than when it was just a skein of yarn and then when it was just a ball of yarn, and now we're seeing it woven and those transitions of colors are nice and delicate, really. I would like to pause and reevaluate. So now that I have a little bit of the sky in and I can sort of feel and see what it's looking like, I hate to say it, but I'm wondering if what I did down here is just looking too chunky, but I'm also wondering if I have a feeling what I'm gonna need at the end of this is something that is an actual focal point. So whether that's, maybe it's a little house, maybe it's something in the sky, I'm not totally sure. I'm gonna keep weaving the sky and see if anything comes to me, which I might regret later, but you know what? I can always take this out without having to remove the whole sky. So I'm just gonna go ahead and keep weaving the sky because, I don't know, I feel like sometimes I just need to keep moving forward and then it'll come to me what this piece might be missing. I'm loving this. Oh my goodness. It just feels so cool. Like there's no way I could just weave this to look this way without this handspun yarn. What's fun about the handspun too is you kind of have to let go of the like super perfect sides because obviously where the yarn is a little bit thicker and thinner, it's sort of giving a little bit of a bumpy side. And I kind of like that. Like it's nice when you don't, sometimes it's really nice to do those super clean edges and then other times it's nice to not have to. All right, I'm gonna slip that out of the way now. And I'm just gonna measure because I know I'm close. And I think I do have an idea for how to easily finish this off. So what I'm gonna do, I think I'm gonna do a twining stitch with this, but it'll be that over 2 under 2. So I'm gonna leave a tail over here. I'm gonna come back over to this end. We're gonna have to raise this up a little bit. And then I'm just gonna do a twining stitch with this yarn because my goal is definitely to not make the top look very obviously different than the rest, because that would kind of ruin the effect if suddenly I use like a solid yarn at the top. This twining stitch isn't gonna be the most holding twining stitch. Like, it's not gonna secure things super well, but at least better than just the plain weave. I'm gonna cut off a little bit of this extra, and then I'm just left with this little piece. But I still have so much of this. Like, I think I could do this at least 1 or 2 more times. All right, so let's revisit the bottom. I have a little bit of a crazy idea, or what feels like a crazy idea because I've come this far. What if I needle felted on top of what I wove? Meaning, what if we took, you know, a little bit of this? Because you know how I was saying I wish I could just kind of mix the colors together? What if I just needle felted over it to mix the colors together? And needle felted like right over the texture. I have no idea if that will work at all or if I'm just gonna ruin the piece. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant. Let's pretend this isn't here for a second and decide if it would have looked really cool to just needle felt all of the hills on. I think that might have been the better choice, because see how now it's looking a little bit more painterly? And then imagine if I did that right over top of this sky yarn. I think that, and even mixing in the lighter green. But yeah, see how I can get a lot more painterly if I was to, let's just move this down here. If I was to actually needle felt this instead of weave it. I do love combining those two things. Okay, this green is not working for me right now. Maybe if it was just way less of it. I think that's the right choice. So if you're like, oh my gosh, are we gonna have to unweave all of this? No, we are not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully, let's just push this up a little bit. I am going to unweave this carefully, and we'll just speed right through this. I'm gonna unweave all of the roving. Okay, so now all I have to do is figure out where I started going all the way across, which it looks like it's probably right about here. Yes. So I just need to now unweave this part and then fill the rest of this in with the hand spun yarn. And then I think I'm gonna needle felt over top of that. And I know that it's like, oh, is that kind of a waste of the yarn? I guess we'll find out, because what am I here for if not to experiment so that hopefully you don't have to experiment as much if you don't want to. So I've got a few rows in there, and now I'm just gonna kind of try to even this out. If I needle felt on top of this anyway, it really doesn't matter. Now, what are we gonna do? Because once I start needle felting on top of this, I'm kind of committed, because I'm not gonna be able to get it off and still looking decent. So we're gonna have to try to do this the best we can. So I'm kind of just starting with laying the colors on here and almost kind of pre-painting. Don't have a strategy, I'm just kind of seeing what it would look like if we just sort of mix together yarns. Already I'm not loving this. I don't know what it is about the green on this one. I think what I'm gonna need to do is lay down some darker colors and then add lighter colors on top of that to add more detail. Okay, okay. Adding in this more vibrant green, now I actually kind of like it. I'm gonna grab my needle felting tools and we're just gonna try and see what happens. So I'm gonna lift up my loom now because I'm kind of done the woven part, so I can just take this tape right off the loom. I'm gonna prop up my loom and I'm gonna start needle felting. And we're gonna see where this takes us. So I just like to put my felting pad right under, obviously, where I'm working. I do not want to needle felt into the books or anything like that. I think I gotta start out with just a little bit and then build onto this, because I'm really just worried about doing like way too much. So I'm gonna have to kind of bring the wool all the way around the edge. Otherwise, we're just gonna see the yarn there. So I'm just gonna lightly needle felt. I'm using my 3 needle tool right now just because it's gonna make it go a lot faster. See, and I can already tell I'm gonna wanna add more on top of this green section. But you kind of just, at least I find, and maybe it's just because I'm not, like I haven't done a ton of this kind of needle felting, that I just kind of start and then it starts forming a shape, and then I can add to that or try to change it a bit as I go. So I have a lot of the yarn still peeking through here, so I'm definitely gonna wanna continue adding more here. One of the nice things is I can kind of keep layering on top of this as I see necessary, but I'm trying not to do anything too thick so that it's easy enough to like mix other things into. I'm kind of feeling like with this strategy, it's like the more different shades of colors you have, the better, because that's kind of, again, what would happen with paint when like little bits of color are mixing together. You're getting such a huge variety of tones and shades and everything. So I don't think it hurts to have quite a few colors added in. So every time I'm adding a new color, I'm kind of letting it go over top of the other colors so that they're a little bit more blended in together. I'm definitely seeing my background yarn peek through a little bit too much, and someone's gonna say it, I'm gonna say it. I absolutely could have used a different yarn to weave in this section, knowing that I was gonna needle felt over it anyway, but I didn't really know how much I was gonna needle felt over it. So again, as with pretty much everything I do on this channel, there's a certain amount of experimentation, and I like it that way. It's only been a couple seconds for you, but it's been a week for me. And I took a step back from this piece because I just wanted to think on it a little bit more and come back with fresh eyes. So I think I have concluded that I want to put some sort of sun here, because right now my thoughts are that this section is very, very small in comparison to the sky. So it doesn't feel like there's as much balance as I want there to be. We are gonna have this, which I think kind of brings that more warmish, natural feeling that this has. But I think if I put some sort of sun right here, and I have these are flower looms, but I figured they would make a perfect circle template to needle felt inside of. So I'm gonna just start needle felting, and we're gonna see where it takes us, because it's all just one big experiment, which I really enjoy. I think I'm discovering a lot and I'm really enjoying it. All right, so I'm starting, you can see, to add essentially some highlights in these areas, because I just felt like everything was blending in a little bit too much. And here's what I discovered. Much like these trees going vertically, I realized that not every fiber needs to be laid horizontally, even for the landscape sections, because you know how, I mean, if we're talking hills and stuff, everything isn't just like this stacked up on each other like that. It's sort of like there's lines going multiple different ways. I hope that makes sense, but I'm finding that, I think at least, it's starting to look a little bit more like a painting, I think, that, and there's more definition. But anyway, I'm gonna just keep going. I think it's done. As someone who is not a painter, I feel like it's really hard to know when to stop, and I'm sure that that's just something that's gonna have to come through repetition and time. So all I'm doing now is just making sure things are as felted as I think looks good. On a woven wall hanging, the amount of felting you do isn't super specific because it's on a woven wall hanging. It's not gonna be really handled after it's hung. So I'm not really concerned too much about it being intensely super hard felt. But I also don't want it to be really fuzzy. So I'm just kind of going over things again. Now this end, I'm not sure how I'm gonna tuck that in because this is all needle felted now. You can see this end just got felted in, and I should have done that with this end, and I wonder if I still can, if I just needle felt this right into the back. Oh, but then it's coming through here. So tuck that a little bit back in. Now, I think this will work just fine since this is all felted. It's not like this end can come out really. So I think if I can cut it off right here, that'll be fine. Okay, I think I'm gonna just stop. It's hard to stop. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish the back, and I'll show you tucking in one of the hand spun ends just so you can see it. And then I will go ahead and finish the rest of this off, and we'll look at it all done. So because I did all these sections where I connected the yarns in the middle instead of in the ends, I just want to make sure that this yarn, I don't take this way, because you see how it's leaving a bit of a hole there? I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna take this one over and then down, and then same with this one. I just want to take it over, and then because it's close to the top, I will take it down. So I could even kind of twist them together. Maybe what would be best actually is to just do a single knot. Yeah, and then I can bring them both down. And then I'll have to double check my top because it is kind of sliding around on me. I'll want to keep double checking that the top is straight, particularly once I actually take it off the loom. But let's tuck one of these ends in just so you can see what it's like. So I'm gonna go grab some loops, and I'll flip this over just to make sure that it's not sticking out really obviously in the front. So I went through a few loops. We're gonna pull this through. And my hopes, I think this yarn is honestly busy enough that you would never see it anyway. But yeah, it's right in there and you can't really see, so that's exactly what we want. So then after I have that tucked in, I can simply just tuck or cut off the excess and then keep going. So I'm gonna do that for the rest. I'm gonna get this on the branch, and then we will have a look at the finished piece. All right, it's all done, so let's have a look at the finished piece. I'm so happy with the way this turned out. Let me know what you think about the woven hand spun yarn in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, check out this one next. Psst, don't forget to subscribe.